Thank you very much. I didn't mean to kind of, make that obvious that you needed to applaud me or anybody else. But anyway, thank you for coming to this event. Thank you to External Sounds for asking me to kind of do it. And thanks to the Droichead Arts Centre for hosting it. I was going to go into a bit of a preamble intro about the man we're just about to see and I'm just about to speak to. But I presume that as it's a sold-out event, that you know everything about him anyway. So, without any further hesitation, please welcome Irvine Welsh. Irvine, a pretty good reception, I think, so far?
Yeah, wonderful. More than I deserve. Thank you.
No, not really, but, if you say so. So we're going to chat for the guts of an hour, 55 minutes. And then after that, we will have questions from the audience. So pay attention, jot your questions down. And at the end, we'll throw it over to you. There'll be somebody with a roving mic. And whose name might be Mike, but I don't know. So Irvine, you're welcome to Droichead, by the way, of course. I'd like to start with how someone whose debut novel went on to so vividly define an era, how did you get there? From what I kind of glean, you were into reading classic works of literature like Emily Bronte and George Eliot, and then further on, Evelyn Waugh. You've said that where you came from, which was a housing estate in working class Edinburgh, that reading wasn't considered too highly. So how did you get from there to there?
I don't know really. I think I've always been interested in having a go at different things, and I think for me probably it was music originally. It was the gateway, and I think it is for a lot of working class kids. I think music, I think for not just working class people, but in general, it's like music's the first thing you encounter, isn't it? It's the first real sort of art form you encounter. You can't really escape from it. You ingest it passively. Whereas, you have to hunt for books, and you have to hunt for art and galleries and all that. But music's just all around. And then, as in Ireland and Scotland as well, we have, that kind of Celtic oral tradition where people sort of, they sing ballads and they tell stories, and the two are all interwoven. So you kind of grow up in a storytelling culture and quite a musical culture where language is very performative, basically, So for me, it was doing music, and it was being in bands and kind of punk era bands, and trying to but realizing that a lot of the songs that I was writing were ballads, they were long stories, and they were sort of and the kind of so it kind of grew out of that, really. I think.
Were your family good storytellers?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody was, and the extended family and the neighbours, and you would, it's one of these things that I lived here in Ireland for 5 years as well, and I noticed it here. It's one of these things that you never actually, I've lived in England and the United States for years, and the big difference about, say, here in Scotland, as opposed to sort of England and America, is that here in Scotland you never get to where you're supposed to be going, because you have to listen to all these stories basically from everybody, from the guy in the taxi to I remember when I was in London, I got up to Edinburgh, and you've got that sensibility in London where you're tearing around on the transport system all the time, And I jumped onto this bus in Edinburgh, and there's a woman in front of me, and I'm thinking like, I think can I just pay my fare, basically? She's talking away to the driver, and and it's just stuff like, you know, it's like, you know, I see you've got your cardigan hanging on the back of your seat, you know, and the driver's going, aye, I thought, if it gets a bit too cold, I can put it on. And if it gets too warm, I can take it off. And he goes, aye, you can't. I go, fuck's sake! Just let me pay my fare and go, let's get the fuck out of here. And I thought, no, actually, it's you that's the problem. Calm down and just enjoy this, you know, operating in this slightly different kind of pace and this kind of quirky madness that, that you know, this performance of the bus driver's cardigan. So you're immersed in that kind of whole culture of, you know, and the bus driver's cardigan's the least of it, kind of embellished into a long tail, you know. So you're immersed in that world, basically, you know, and I think it lends itself well to writing fiction.
Was there any one book or novel that in retrospect think that you think that set you off on the kind of writing path? You mentioned songs, but I'm just thinking about a book.
Yeah, I mean,
of
I
any
like the thing is that, you know, when you are introduced to books, as I said, that, you know, you're introduced to books that are completely from outside your culture. I mean, you mentioned the Irvine Welsh novels, and I used to really love the Men in Arms trilogy, basically, you know, and what I really liked about it was the male schadenfreude, basically, you know, that the competition kind of between men, the affection, but the competition as well. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if somebody wrote a book about sort of kind of, you know, the characters that I knew and grew up with in that, you know, in that kind of way, you know, because I really recognised it. And there were writers, you know, there are always writers in Scotland that, like William McIlvanney and Alistair Gray and James Kelman, who were kind of very inspirational writers to me because they were all working class guys, basically. And they were writing about the kind of the places and the people that I understood. So it was a combination of all these different sort of aesthetic sensibilities, if you like, starting to meld together.
Right. What did you make of, you mentioned the Evelyn Waugh, I think it's called the Sword of Honour trilogy or something like that.
Yeah.
What did you think of in relation to what you wanted to write about from a kind of, you know, Edinburgh elite working class aspect? What did you think about his depiction of what he wrote about, which was quite, you know, upper class?
Yeah, completely different. Completely different background, but the psychology between the characters was very interesting to me because I did recognise it. And I think, again, it's like, you know, when somebody comes from that background and they grow up in a big house and it's like there's a you know, rooms kind of stuffed with books and all that, where you don't really have that in a council estate because there's no room, basically, to store books. People don't really hold on to them. There's usually one novel that gets passed around, basically. So that was a different. So that's why, you know, you're into music, basically, because that's the thing that sort of it's easy to store, it's portable, and it's ubiquitous. But yeah, I mean, I sort of thought that. I wanted to write a book, basically, and I put that on the back burner because I was so immersed in music. I was so immersed in trying to, in different bands, trying to sort of to make some headway. I enjoyed writing songs, but I'm not very musical. I can't, you know, I've not got great keyboarding or fretboarding skills, and I haven't got much of a voice. So I was always the guy who always ended up getting the elbow first in any band. But as soon as it got to a level of competence, I would be the first one down the road, basically.
You went to London in 1978, I think. Is that correct? And was that specifically because you were drawn to, you know, the kind of punk rock scene down there? There was a very healthy punk rock scene in Scotland at that time, of course.
Yes, yeah.
So what made you gravitate towards London?
Well, I mean, I was really fortunate that my uncle Alec, who was a train driver in London, he married a a woman from London, and they originally lived in Fulham when it was the working class area, and then they moved out to Southall in Middlesex. And I loved it down there. I used to go down for summer holidays, and it was like almost like a kind of, it was almost like a second family in a way, you know. And so I sort of, I almost kind of, you know, grew up with that kind of dual citizenship in a way, if you like. It was so it kind of, even predating punk, it sort of, it just assumed, you know, it just seemed to me that it would be great to go down there. It was, you know, there seemed to be more things going on, more opportunities, and then obviously the punk explosion had really kind of sealed the deal for me. You know, I really was, I wanted to immerse in that as much as I could.
What was that like?
You know what? I mean, I loved it because there was a bunch of, there wasn't many punks in Southall, because Southall had kind of had a lot of Asian migration into the area, and it became quite an Asian area, but the punks that were there were quite kind of hardcore. So a bunch of us used to get on the 207 bus and go into Shepherd's Bush, and then kind of hang there, and then get into Soho. And we used to, we occasionally went to the Marquee, but we used to go to the Vortex, which was like the hardcore kind of punk place, because it was all the kind of, you never see the Clash there, but you see bands like kind of the UK Subs and 999 and Chelsea, and it was like, you know, because it was Monday and Tuesday, basically, it was like, it was a kind of, it was a very sort of culty thing. You didn't get the weekend punks or the sort of, the people from the suburbs and all that didn't come in. So it was like, it was more inner city and working class. And it wasn't a big scene. There was only about kind of, maybe about 200 kind of at the, you know, there. So it was like, and people got to know each other, and, you know, from all over London and further afield. So it was such an invigorating time, basically.
You were in a band called the Pubic Lice, is that correct?
Yes, yeah, or the pubes for short.
Sorry for bringing that up, but I mean, what was it like being in a band called the Pubic Lice?
The most interesting thing about the band was the name. You know, unfortunately, we weren't much good, and the ones that were good kind of tended to sort of kind of, you know. I mean, I was the guy that wrote the songs. Couldn't particularly sing them, you know, and couldn't play anything. So I was almost like, you know, you're superfluous to requirements, because you can't really play anything well. You've gone from lead guitar to rhythm guitar to bass, and you just don't have that musical thing. And also your songs are like big kind of long ballads. We weren't kind of just three chord thrashers, like, you know. So I was kind of I was one of these guys who probably wanted to be a punk, but was probably more instinctively prog rock. Like, you know, I was one of pages and pages of ideas for these things, which I suppose in a way were kind of drafts and novels more than anything else. Yeah.
Okay. You I was going to say dabble, but maybe that'll be the wrong word. You were going to call from the grips of heroin addiction, I think, at around that time. Is that correct?
Yeah, that would be probably more in the early 80s, kind of 81, 82. And again, like, I suppose like a lot of people, you know, were kind of, it was always, you know, I was growing up with this thing that parents and teachers and social workers and they would say to you, don't smoke dope, it's going to kill you, you know. And obviously you're kind of shitting it to smoke some cannabis, and then when you do, it didn't. Then it was, you know, don't take speed, you know, don't take acid and all that, you know. And then it was don't take heroin, you know. And I thought, well, they've cried wolf once too often, basically. It's not, you know, and it almost did kill me. But it's a thing that. But I noticed that when I was in rehab, that most of the people in rehab, that heroin was a sort of, it was a symptom rather than the cause, basically. It was people who had maybe some kind of post-traumatic stress disorder that had kind of been maybe in some ways physically or sexually abused as kids, or they had some kind of anxiety or depression issues that hadn't been kind of treated or diagnosed. Or some cases, some kind of physical thing, some kind of maybe some kind of back pain or something that painkillers couldn't get to, you know. These things were all like kind of, there's maybe a smaller number of us who were just listening to too many Velvet Underground albums, basically, and listening to too much kind of Lou Reed and New York Dolls, and we're kind of thought that the enigma of being a kind of sort of a rock and roller or in a band or an anarchist or whatever was about taking every kind of drug that you could and getting into these kind of scenes. So it was more for the enigma of it and more for the enigma of being in that scene, which I kind of perversely enjoyed, basically, you know.
Being in the scene?
Being in the scene,
the
yeah.
drug itself?
Yeah, the drug itself to an extent, but it kind of, the novelty of that wears off very, very quickly, you know. But I think the thing for me was that because there was nothing else, because it was just kind of stupid adventurism, there was nothing driving me to stay on the drug, you know. And I could always, you know, tell in the group, you know, who was going to walk out of that and be all right and not really experience any more sort of kind of issues with heroin, and who was going to be battling it for the rest of their life, so for a long part of their lives, like, you know. That whole dynamic and that whole subculture, which was a kind of, to me was a kind of almost like a subculture of a subculture. It was like a subculture of punk, basically. It was a really interesting thing to be involved in. Yeah.
Right. When you look back from where you are now, the age you are now, to the responsible age you are now, to the possibly less responsible age that you were back then, what are you going to make of you doing that or being in that area?
You know, I think when you, I mean, for me personally, I didn't really see it that way at the time. You know, I think when you're young, you live in the moment, and what happened to me was that, you know, I moved into the squat in Shepherd's Bush, and I was like, you know, you just have that incredible feeling of freedom and that you can do what you like. There's no constraints on you. You know, my parents are up in Edinburgh, my aunt and uncle are out in Southall, and here I am, you know, in Shepherd's Bush in London with my own little kind of posse of friends who are all from all over the place. You know, there's kind of people from, you know, there's a few Londoners, but there's a lot of people from, you know, people from Ireland or you know, Scotland, and people from like Sheffield in the north of England, people from Paris and all, you know. So you had all these people that were young but untethered. You know, they had nobody to sort of say, "Fuck's sake, you screw the nut" or something. You know, you were completely free, and you had this very, very powerful peer group who were all into punk and were all into anarchy and were all into the politics of the time. So it was very. It was a tremendous feeling of freedom, basically, and also a feeling that you could do anything you wanted, and there was no sanction. So I was I didn't realize at the time, but I was incredibly reckless, basically, you know, in my behaviour around drugs and around the law and around just behaviour in general, and you don't really think of it in that way, but now you think it was quite a marginal life, you know.
Right, okay. So all of this was kind of early 80s, mid 80s, whatever, through the 80s. It was kind of bubbling away. You know, you had your stint with addiction, rehab, masculinity, identity. You know, those kind of areas, I think, you know, formulated in the back of your head to your fingertips to write Train Spotting. Is that fair enough to say?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think I think for me it was like, you know, I mean, we'd been in all the various kind of band incantations that I had, incarnations that I had, we'd, you know, I got used to just sending cassette tapes away to record companies and kind of badly recorded demos and not really, you know, not even getting an acknowledgement they'd been sent, basically. That was, you know, and you think, oh, you know, you fantasize that they'd be playing it and somebody would be passing it around the office and blowing away. And it probably just went straight into the bucket. It was like, to me, I got to that point and I'd cleaned up my act and I was, I'd got a couple of sensible jobs and I got a couple of promotions in one of those jobs, and I was heading for this very a kind of different kind of hell in a way, you know. It was more of a sort of a white collar middle management hell, you know. And I thought, well, you know, I'm never going to be this kind of creative person, this artist that I kind of aspired to be. And I thought maybe I should try my hand at writing a novel. And so there was a bit of desperation involved. You know, I thought this is, in terms of me doing something creative, this is like the last chance saloon, really.
Right.
You know?
I'm curious as to what the sensible jobs were.
Well, I started off, what happened was I worked for a guy who had set up this this kind of employment project, wanted to recruit long-term unemployed people onto it. He wanted to set up this agency which was funded by the Greater London Enterprise Board, which was then part of the GLC, which had been abolished, but it kind of functioned as a separate agency. And I got a job there with him. He just kind of employed me for no particular reason. I was massively kind of underqualified for this kind of development officer job. And he kind of explained to me that, you know, he had all these kind of industrial psychology qualifications and all that, but he just went on gut instinct and he kind of, he liked the way I was in the interview. And I worked with him setting up these employment schemes throughout inner London, and then I went up to Edinburgh to do a similar thing for the district council up there, which was like kind of economic development, focusing on employment and training, and I kept getting promoted, basically, you know, and it was like because of I got promoted. And the job got kind of crapper and crapper. It was that kind of era of...
You sound really annoyed when you said, I kept getting promoted.
Yeah, I was, because I thought, you know, it was always like, I'll stick this out for another year, then I'll go and travel, or I'll go and get a band together, or I'll write this novel, or whatever. And I sort of felt the job changed to the extent that it became less interesting. It became about how to... Competitive tendering was in it. It came about how to sell off council services. So it was like drawing up contracts with private employers to hive off council services to them. And it really, you know, I wasn't really interested in doing that, you know. So basically, I started writing Trainspotting as an antidote to all this, like to try and go back and make sense of a kind of darker period in my life, I suppose.
Okay, and when you started writing Trainspotting, what kind of constituent parts did you want to kind of absolutely have in the book? I mean, the characters are there, they're vivid, they're unforgettable. The dialogue is there. Might not be incredibly easy for people who don't come from Scotland or who live in that area to kind of get a kind of handle on it.
Well, it wasn't easy for me because, you know, you're not, when I wrote the whole thing and I look back on it, I couldn't understand the word of it myself because you're not used to seeing, it doesn't matter if English is your first language or whether you're Scottish or South African or Canadian, you're not used to seeing words written on the page that way, you know, so it does take a bit of a while to get into it, you know. Sure. But yeah, I mean, I thought, well, this is, you know, I've got to finish this. I've just got to finish this book, basically. And see what happens with it.
Right. Well, I think we know what happened in kind of many ways, and it continues to be hugely inspirational and influential. But as you said about the writing of it, do you think not necessarily even the language, but did people understand what you were trying to do or say with it at the beginning?
I think there's a lot of hostility to the book. It was interesting that in Edinburgh there was this massive AIDS and HIV kind of heroin epidemic, and I mean, it's like all the council were talking about was the tragedy of Dutch elm disease for the trees for the tourists. Like, it was like what was happening in the housing scheme just wasn't on the radar at all. So it was like I was kind of public enemy number one with the establishment in Edinburgh for bringing this to everybody's attention, and I think also it was just it was a side of Edinburgh they didn't particularly want to engage with, and it was funny because it was kind of condemned as this is going to encourage people to take drugs, and within 6 months every single health education advert in Scotland was like an outtake of Trainspotting. Basically, it was like it just flipped over completely. Basically,
right. It was kind of like choose health.
Well, the thing was, it was like they saw that the idea of saying to people just say no and don't take drugs was absolutely stupid. People were taking them for a reason, and the reason is because they're kind of good and fun. That's one side of it, but the other side is that they will kill you as well. So you have to show both these things, and I think that changed it changed the whole discourse, basically. I think.
Yes. And it changed the whole culture as well. I think. It's fair enough to say that. Like, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's like it became. I think it acknowledged the culture that was there. I mean, the Scottish fiction at the time that I was reading, it was like working class culture was. It was kind of stuck in the 70s. It was like two guys going into a pub and the guy saying to the barman, 2 pints of heavy, please, barman. Whereas apart from the fact that everybody was drinking lager, nobody was drinking beer at all. Everybody was shooting up heroin, basically. So the idea that this would, this kind of almost retro culture was kind of touted as kind of underground working class culture was pretty ridiculous.
Right. Has it surprised you 33 years after the book was first published that it still has a life? I mean, we were talking earlier on, you said every kind of 5 years or so it has another bump, if you'll pardon the expression. And it sustains itself almost.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in a way I'm not surprised, but I mean, I thought it was I thought it was because it was a book about youth, and then I thought it was because it was a book about drugs, but now I think it's about employment, basically. It's about what we do after paid work, and I think that's why it's lasted so long, because it's not the old industrial working class that are just asking that question now. It's everybody, and even more so with AI. It's going to take away all the white collar jobs, and you're thinking to yourself, well, I mean, thank you for that. What I mean? For fuck's sake, what are we going to do? It's like, so we're all in that existential crisis. We're all members of the precariat, basically. So we don't know what the future holds for us in terms of work and employment opportunities. And that breeds an existential crisis too. We don't actually know what we're here for, basically. So everything's related to that, to that technological change, and that's an ongoing thing. So I think it's whenever you have a change in a society, like when you had from feudalism to capitalism, you have an attendant plague, and that was like the Black Death. It was the sanitary plague of having people moving from the fields into the factories and being pushed together, and the insanitary conditions. And now it's almost like it's like the idea that we have a kind of psychic kind of plague. You know, we're moving from a world where we make things to the world where we think things and conceptualize things. And so the psychic plague and the psychoactive plague is kind of drugs, but it's addiction in the broader sense. You know, it's addiction to phones, it's addiction to all the online things of the screen, gambling, pornography, everything that you can access immediately to give you the dopamine hits from being online. I mean, if you look at people in the streets now, if you look at people on the underground and in London, if you look at people walking down the streets here, everybody's got this thing stuck to their face, you know, and you think to yourself, we look at old films of the 50s, 60s, 70s, and you see people chain smoking and you laugh at kind of that, you know. I mean, what will people in the future be doing looking at us with this thing stuck to their face?
Yeah, yeah. It's an interesting thing that the perception for some people is that your work started when Trainspotting was published, but I read somewhere that you said that you retired when Trainspotting was published.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I don't regard kind of writing, and you know, it's like I don't really regard writing as work as such. It's a bit, you know, it's a bit like indulging your hobby. Basically, I would do that anyway. You know, I would be the only thing. I would be writing anyway. I would be doing music anyway. I'd be kind of hopefully doing TV and film stuff anyway, because these are all fun things to do, you know. And that would be my sort of hobbies and interests. And that's all I've been doing for 30 odd years. They're just indulging my hobbies and interests, basically. Yeah.
Okay, and getting paid for it, which is brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, if you can make your hobby pay, it's one of the best things in the world. For you know,
and what about provocation and being confrontational in your work? You know, Trainspotting was maybe the kind of first stab at that. But since then, you know, you've written work that has been equally, if not more, provocational. Do you like to do that specifically? Is it a natural thing? Or do you think as the years and decades have gone by that those kind of edges you had early on have kind of been softened or curved a wee bit?
I think I've probably got worse. Like, I think that the publishing industry has really changed, because they used to love you being controversial. It was better, you know, the more controversial you were, the better. And now it's the other way around. You know, they don't like kind of social media pile-ons and cancellations and all that kind of stuff, even though that kind of era has kind of ebbed a bit away now, I think. But we're still not in the era when you were seen to be as controversial. It's very hard to be controversial now when, I mean, you've got a kind of, you've basically got the most powerful man, leader of the Western world, as a sort of doubly incontinent child rapist, like, you know. So how controversial can a writer be, basically, like, you know?
I'm not sure if that's been proven, by the way. Just if there are any solicitors in the audience. But yeah, okay, please carry on.
So yeah, so you've got that. So it's a different landscape basically now. It's like I don't think controversy sort of operates in that same way as it used to. But yeah, I think you can sort of you probably, I mean, in terms personally, I think that when I write something, I've got to really be scared of, you know, the response I've got. I always think to myself, if I don't have that feeling, that kind of feeling of existential dread, like, you know, God, what's my mother going to think? You know, what's my wife going to think? What's the kids going to think? You know, and I have to really have this feeling of kind of humiliation and shame when I finish a book. otherwise I feel even worse. I think this is not going to work, like, you know. And then you think, God, I'm feeling like shit. Yes, thank fuck for that, like, you know. So you have that kind of perverse thing going on that you have to sort of, you think, my God, what are they going to think of me, you know, for writing this. And that's the bit that I really love, is to feel that that kind of anxiety about how people are going to look at you. You know, your kind of your best friends, or your, you know, my wife's going to look at me like I've got two heads, basically, like, you know. So so I think it's good to have that feeling. I think that's the feeling you really need to have as a writer.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting concept, because it refers back to something on a documentary you had. I think it was on Sky TV about 4 or 5 years ago. It was called Offended by Irvine Welsh, and it spoke about cancel culture, the impact of fear of offence on artistic expression. So the obvious question is that, do you think artists and writers should remain completely free to express what they want?
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem with the reason I think people aren't, or you know, is like, well, there's a couple of reasons. It really is all to do with the internet and online culture, because everything becomes decontextualized. You know, so you have to, you know, and it's everything. You know, a decontextualized, fictionalized line, or kind of, you know, is potentially could be, you know, potentially be weaponized against someone, which is kind of bizarre, because it is fiction, and it takes place in a, you know, it takes place within a broader story of plot and characterization. So that's quite a strange thing. It's quite a strange environment, and it's also people will, anything that's controversial, people will find out about it through. They won't find out about it firsthand. You know, they won't kind of read the book or see the film or listen to the record. They'll get a kind of manufactured outrage that's passed over the internet and spread like a virus. So I think there is a constricting sort of there's a more constricting element that lends writers and artists more towards self-censorship. But I think it comes in the whole context of us building a kind of a post-culture society. You know, because we don't have anything out there in the culture anymore. We don't have things that are happening, you know, at street level now, because everything happens online. It's a media culture, so it's top down, basically. You know, it's and I think that, you know, the internet was supposed to be this great library that was supposed to be kind of empowering and informative. And now it's seen as more something that does things to us rather than for us. You know, it's like we're milking you for your algorithms, fill in this form, fill in that form, fill it again. It's like this big Kafkaesque bureaucracy that kind of exists to suck the life out of us and to kind of constrain us and to make these, you know, what Blake called the kind of self-manufactured manacles. It kind of feels that life has kind of become more confining rather than less confining. You know, we're more alone, we're more indoors and all that. We just have this thing, this miserable thing in our faces all the time, and it doesn't. But you know, we're reading less books, we're watching less kind of quality stuff. Our attention span's going down, so it seems to be steering us towards a post-cultural life.
Right. What about separating the artist from the art? Few examples. Woody Allen's early movies, Michael Jackson, Roisin Murphy, actors like Kevin Spacey. What are your thoughts on that particular area?
Well, you know, it's like a lot of it is kind of a lot of it is kind of class related in a way as well. This thing, you know, it's like I mean, it's like you'll have the kind of Hampstead intellectuals saying, you know, it's terrible. It's terrible about Roman Polanski, but he made some amazing films. He was a true artist and all that, you know. Because Gary Glitter looks like a truck driver from Hull, it's like, oh no, hang Gary Glitter, and you know they probably should, but I mean it's like kind of I don't see why Polanski kind of should be treated any different from Gary Glitter, basically.
Have any publishing houses that you've written books for or been contracted to, have they ever kind of, you know, even discreetly said, could you just tone it down a wee bit, Irvine?
No, I mean not really. I mean I think what there is now, and that's because we live in a much more is it litigious or litigious? Whatever, you know,
litigious, I think.
Litigious,
Yeah.
We live in this much more litigious society, so there's a lot more stuff run past legals than there used to be. But I don't really think so. I think it's like, by and large, you get. I mean, I don't know. I think that a lot of younger writers might get this pressure more than me, because I'm always seeing like, you know, this guy is kind of, you know, he's a 90s guy. He writes about, you know, his last millennium. He writes about all this stuff when people did crazy daft things to each other then. Now we don't do that, we just have mental breakdowns quietly. You know, so it's like, so we don't go out, we just have mental breakdowns indoors basically and tweet about it and all that kind of stuff.
Do you feel more freedom now as a writer than previous?
I don't know. I mean, I think that, I mean, I've kind of I've started to feel more free again in the last maybe in the last 2 or 3 years, and I think the reason for that is because I've stopped researching on the internet. You know, I've stopped, and again, it's because of the Kafkaesque thing that I was talking about. I mean, the straw that broke the camel's back for me was I was researching this insurance fraud, and I googled something. I think I just googled insurance fraud. And it had something like 500 pages of people trying to sell me insurance policies. You know, and I kept going, it went into thousands and thousands, and I thought, I just thought, I can't do this. So I went down to the British Library, which is literally 2 stops on the tube. It literally takes 6 minutes to get to my house for the British Library. And I wrote my ticket out to this guy, and he was very helpful. And he came back with this big stack of books with these post-it notes, all really pertinently focused on this area that I was looking for. And I had a really pleasant conversation with them, and it felt really nice to have that human contact and interface. And I sat down, and I enjoyed flipping the pages, and kind of was more engaged and switched on with the whole thing. And I thought, this is great. I'm not going to just mess around on the internet now. I just get too distracted and into other things. So I'm just going to basically sack it, and I'm going to do all my research in the old-fashioned way. And it feels great. It feels like being a proper writer again.
Yeah, sure. What do you do to keep your work feeling urgent to you personally? I mean, you've been in the public eye for over 33 years. What do you do to maintain that level of vitality, creative vitality?
I think you have to travel a lot, and you have to keep getting out a lot. And you know, the older you get, the more inclined you are to just want to stay at home and watch kind of sort of a Netflix show with the missus and sort of sit up there with your mugs of cocoa and all that kind of stuff. You know, but
which, in fairness, there's nothing wrong with that.
There's nothing wrong with it at all, no. But you have to kind of counterintuitively force yourself to get out and see people and all that and get around. And that's what I try and do. I mean, I try and get out, and I try and visit friends. I try and travel. I try and I go out and DJ in clubs, and I like to get out there and to keep kind of busy and keep engaged. I think. I think also taking an interest, continue to take an interest in in books and music and film and stuff that's invigorating and is going to sort of is going to kind of keep you interested. And in terms of writing, I like to do things that that explain the world to me. So I like writing about old characters from Trainspotting and Glue, but I also like to kind of do completely new settings and new environments. And my next book that comes out in August is set in Las Vegas. It's a family saga kind of set in Las Vegas, and not the strip Las Vegas, the planned community of Summerlin that Howard Hughes built in the 50s, where everybody came from LA. So I have to mix it up. I have to kind of I have to go faster in my own lane, and I have to move out of my lane as well, basically, to keep myself kind of interested and invigorated in things. So basically that's the way I tend to operate.
Okay, and that leads me on to asking you about the original songs that you're co-writing for. Who would have thought Trainspotting the musical? So could you maybe just go into that a bit, please?
Yeah, it's a funny one, because if somebody had told me, I mean, I was going to say 30 years ago, but somebody had told me even 10 years ago that you'd be doing a musical of Trainspotting. Well, they actually did, Phil McIntyre, who's producing it, who produced We Will Rock You, the Queen musical, and he does a lot of the big West End shows. He's been a friend for a while, and he said to me for the last 30 years, when are we going to do the Trainspotting musical? And I've always went, what? No, And then I thought to myself, well, what's going to happen is that eventually it'll happen. When I'm an urn on someone's mantelpiece, some fucking horrible bastard like Andrew Lloyd Webber is going to come along and make a fortune out of this, So, but rather, and it'll be quite shit as well, Why not? Myself and my music partner Steve, I've said to Steve one day, why don't we just write a bunch of songs from Trainspotting and see if this works as a musical, basically, So we did, and I mean, I think the songs are absolutely brilliant. Of course I'm going to say that anyway, and hopefully you'll be able to judge for yourself soon. But I think the songs are great, and we played them to the producers, and they were really just blown away by them, and they thought, this is fabulous, So we wrote about 18. We'll put maybe about 12 into the musical, and we'll license some of the tracks that are known associated with Trainspotting from the film and from the book even, and I think it's shaping up to be a really, really good show.
And that's starting in
July.
London,
Yeah, we open in London on July the 15th, and then we take it around the UK. I'm not sure if we've got dates for Ireland yet, but I'm sure we will have.
Okay, we'll open it up to the audience in about 3 or 4 minutes. But so maybe just two more questions from myself. I read somewhere that you have sold over 30 million copies of your books, and they've been translated into about 30 languages. Those figures may or may not be true. I don't know.
I hope so. That would be great.
Well, I researched them on the internet, so who knows?
Gotta be true.
Who knows?
Gotta be true,
has it surpassed your expectations that the books have amassed that amount of readership?
Yeah, I mean, I've never had any expectations of them. It's like I think that expectations kill. Because I was a serial failure in music. Well, all these rejections that. It's been such an easy life in books, because it's the first book I finished, I sent away to the first publisher, which was the biggest publisher in the UK. It got published, and it kind of, it just did really well, and I thought, this is weird, this is kind of such a strange thing. But the biggest buzz was finishing it. The biggest buzz to me, the biggest buzz you'll ever have as a writer is finishing a book and being able to really type the end and mean it. It's a proper finished book rather than one of the interminable drafts, and sending it off to a publisher and getting it published, and having it translated and having it made into a stage play and then a film. These are all buzzes, but they don't beat the buzz to me of writing. And that's the thing that I realised, that the most important thing is to be working on a book that you're really enjoying and being able to finish it.
Right. And briefly, is there going to be a TV series?
Yeah, I've had a lot of people have said to me that, a lot of producers have been in touch about particularly in the last 18 months when they heard that the musical was definitely happening. They've been talking about making it into TV. But I want to, I think one thing at a time. I want to get this show up and running first, because there's a lot of really brilliant young actors in it, which some of them are going to be household names. I think, they're just so good and so polished and accomplished at that, at that young age. It's very difficult to believe how good they are. But so I want to get this done. I want to get the show kind of up and running and established, and then start thinking about how it would best be served as a long-form TV show, if it would be. Yeah.
Okay, right. I hope you're prepared. Any of you? 2 or 3? Anybody would like to?
As they say back in Leith, don't be shy. Your mother wasn't.
Okay, I'm glad I said that. You said that and I didn't. Anybody? Yeah, gentleman over there. I think there's going to be Mr. Roving Mike is going to come your way.
Yeah, and starting up your books, you had these experiences with certain dogs that the dogs were kind of like some cruel that happened to them or tortured. I was wondering, did you have a bad experience in your past that you were kind of venting that in your books?
Yeah, believe it or not, I love dogs, and I kind of, I love animals. I love dogs and cats, and and but I thought, because I love dogs so much, I thought, what's the most horrible? One of the most horrible things that can happen, I think, is somebody kind of being cruel to a dog, so I wrote this despicable character, and I made him. I made him do terrible things to his dog, but he's also a kind it's like he's also a rapist in it as well, and he does this there's this horrible rape scene, and I had about, in the book called Marabou Stock Nightmares, and I had about 2 complaints about the rape scene, and about 5,000 complaints about the dog, and I thought after that, I thought, well, fuck this, I'm going to have a dog torture scene in every book, basically. Now I got to the point where, it's like, when I come in, the dog kind of looks at me with the sad eyes, as if to say, like, I know what you're writing here, don't, please, So, so I have to, it's now I can just have a character sitting with a patting his dog or leashing his dog and all that. You kind of think to yourself, something's going to happen here. I don't even need to make it happen anymore. But that's one of the things that you're talking about, mellowing out a bit. That's one of the things that I have kind of cut down on a little bit in the last few books.
Okay, there's a lady up there with a hand up, right in the middle, at the back.
I think I'll be able to project.
Yeah, you're doing all right. Yeah.
Hi, Irvine. My name is Kelly, and I'm absolutely thrilled to hear you because I got to meet you, unfortunately, 3 years ago. But it's more of a statement than it is a question. So I was thrilled to hear about the musical. But on the very stage that you're on right now, we performed Train Spotting when I was about 16, I think it was, after it had come out. So I don't think you knew about it, and I don't think you knew the royalties. So I just think it's very nice that it's a full circle moment. So I think I owe you a drink, maybe.
Right.
So,
at least, yeah.
At least. So, but listen, thanks very much. Brilliant to hear you, but everything else inspirational. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Guy over there at the side. Thank you.
Hi, very long. censoring yourself. How do you kind of push past that, even when, you know, you write something very nasty, and kind of separate yourself from that, and that it kind of serves a story?
I think I do really, because I think, you know, I'm one of the kind of writers that I let the subconscious do most of the heavy lifting. So I kind of, you know, I'm sitting away typing, and then I get into the zone where I don't really know what I'm typing, basically. And I look back and I go, oh my God, somebody's going to see this, somebody's going to read this, what am I going to do? You know, I think that's a great feeling. So I tend to, I tend to sort of, I tend to like to shock and horrify myself, basically, to get that kind of reaction from myself. You know, because if I don't, I'm not really going to get a reaction from anybody else. So yeah, I tend to go out there, and I think to myself, well, it's fiction. You know, that's the whole purpose of it. You have that license to go out there, so use that freedom. You know, it's an important freedom, I think.
Okay. Guy up there, if you could just put your hand up again, please. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's funny actually said censorship. I was going to ask something very similar, but who was the first person to read Train Spotting, and how did they react?
I think it would probably be my friend Kevin Williamson, who started up the Rebel Ink paper in Edinburgh, and who was quite he was an important figure in that scene when all these writers were emerging, like kind of myself and Duncan MacLean and Barry Graham, Alan Warner, Laura Hurd, Gordon Legg, you know, so we were all coming through at roughly the same time, and Kevin got all this together in Rebel Ink, and he was the first person that I gave the manuscript to, and then it went to Duncan MacLean, who was a writer friend, and then it went to Robin Robertson, the publisher. So I've got a buzz off of. I've been reading bits of it in performance events and all that, so I had a sense that it was kind of, people were vibing with it. But I got a great sense of it first from Kevin, then from Duncan, but also from Robin Robertson, the publisher, as well. But he said it's a great book, but nobody's going to buy it. I'm not going to sell, but it has literary merit, so I'm going to publish it. But so yeah, so it was great to get that feedback, basically. Yeah.
Maybe one more question, if anybody would like to. Somebody up there, I can't see what, but I can see your hand. Yeah.
Hey, Irvine, your work is obviously synonymous with the music scenes of the 70s, 80s, and 90s. But I was wondering, is there any like current or new bands or artists that you're really into?
I'm trying to think of I think. It's kind of a predictable thing to say, but I think Kneecap, just for the uncompromising integrity, and the Fontaines DC is a guitar band, and it's interesting that they're all coming out of here. That I think that there's a big kind of problem in Britain with the sterility of the cultural scene there, and it's I feel that I'm not really seeing. I mean, I think there's some kind of great grime artists and rap artists from the black communities in Britain, but I'm not really seeing any kind of guitar bands that are really exciting me, that seem to have that edge. It all seems to be kind of posh kids at kind of college milk fairs who are sort of whose parents and relatives are kind of corporate executives, and they're giving each other contracts and all that, and they're all very polished and nice and all that. But I'm not really feeling it, basically. But again, that could just be me being an old cunt.
Right, well, there's a few more questions I want to ask, and then maybe we're going to wrap it up. And just so that people are aware, the tickets you bought for this are also valid for the gentleman's DJ session in Sarsfields. So you were supposed to be here 3 years ago, but your mother died.
Yeah, that was a bit selfish of her, wasn't it?
So very inconvenient. But more seriously, obviously, to what extent would she have influenced you in your burgeoning career as a creative person?
My mother and father were always incredibly encouraging to anything that I wanted to do. You know, it was massively sort of given a loads of license, and you know, probably more than I deserved in a lot of ways. And my mother always read every one of my books.
Really?
Every single one of them. She read them all, and she didn't really like train spotting when it first came out. It was like she goes, "Do you have to wash your dirty washing in public? Do you have to hang your dirty washing in public like that, son?" And then, of course, the royalties started to come in. She went, "Oh, it's not bad though. Can you get me that new double glazing in my house?" So, the only one that she didn't like at all was The Sex Lives of Siamese Twins, which was it's about a fitness trainer and an artist, two women in America, and there's a big kind of lesbian sex scene in it, like, you know, it's about 10 pages long, which when I was writing it, I had both hands on the keyboard, I assure you. But she said to me, like, I said to her, she never said anything about the book, like, I said, "You didn't like that book, eh?" And she goes, "No, son, I didn't." You know? And I goes, "Why?" She says, "It was like, there was far too much lesbian sex in it." And I said, "Well, define too much," like, and then she said to me, like, "What do you know about lesbian sex anyway?" I said, "Well, hopefully more than you." So it was one of these kind of unsatisfactory conversations that you have with a parent that nobody comes out well, basically. Like that.
I often think that, you know, mothers, perhaps more than fathers, worry about their children more for obvious reasons. Did she worry about you when you were, like, you know, a teenager down in London, train spotting, etc., etc.?
Yes, all the time. I mean, I think there was, I think it was like, you know, ever since I was about, I think ever since I was about 5 and went to school, you know, it was always that kind of oscillation between extreme worrying and complete resignation, extreme worrying and complete resignation. But yeah, I mean, you know, obviously kind of great woman, and miss her terribly, but was always very supportive, but not uncritically supportive. Kind of very much, she was great at kind of puncturing my ego and bursting my balloon. Like, she had a really acid put downs, like, you know, and I kind of, it's kind of nice to be free of them, but I do miss them as well.
Lesbian sex scenes notwithstanding, was she proud of you?
Yeah, I mean, she'd never tell me that, but I would hear her talking, boring the neighbours shitless with it, like, you know what I mean? So yeah, she was, but again, you know, she would rather, she would rather burn in hell than tell me, basically.
All right. Okay. My name is Tony Clayton-Lea, and this is Irvine Welsh. Round of applause, please.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, not that you would need reminding, but off to Sarsfields with you. Because in about, I'm not sure what time are you, I know Dom Wilton is supporting and you are.
I think I'm supporting Dom. I'll be in my bed when he's kind of tipping on. Fantastic.
Okay.
But, yeah.
Now you know. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Cheers.
That was great. That was really great.